we're gonna make a little bread recipe, but it's a little bit different. So we're gonna be making a beetroot bread. So we're actually gonna be using raw beetroot. It's pink, it's vibrant, it's full of this natural sweetness from the beetroot. Really stunning loaf to make, but very, very simple. So with this recipe, we're not actually using any water at all. Instead of water, we're using the juice of raw beetroot. Now, I don't fancy juicing this one by hand, so we are going to put our Kenwood chef to work, and we're going to be using the juice extractor attachment, which is absolutely brilliant. So this little guy is going to do all the hard work for us. So we're going to set up the juice extractor. Very simply, cap comes off. It'll sit straight in, just line straight up, and let's give it a little twist just to lock it in place. Pulp goes in here, juice goes in here, absolutely brilliant. To juice the beetroot, just going to roughly chop them, depending on the side of the beetroot, chop into quarters. If they're only small, they can actually go straight in. So before you start to juice, make sure the machine is on. We want it on a high speed because it'll just get the extractor moving as fast as possible. So really crank it up. Great thing about kind of using raw beetroot and juicing it fresh, you retain all that beautiful flavour. You get all the nutrition from the beetroot, it's going straight into our dough. And visually when you see it, the colour is just stunning. It's a great one to make with kids because it just kind of looks like Play-Doh. So that's it done, so quick, very, very simple. So you just clip off the jug. So for this recipe, we're looking for 300 mils of beetroot juice. Obviously, every beetroot is going to be a little bit different. 3 to 4 beetroots should do exactly what we need. So now we can get our dough started. I'm going to keep using the Kenwood Chef here. I'm using the dough hook attachment. So we've got our 300 mils of beetroot juice. Sometimes you'll find that the flour catches at the very bottom of the bowl. By having the liquid at the bottom, it'll help to incorporate the dough much, much easier. We'll add our olive oil, and now we're going to add our flour. We're using 400 grams of strong flour, and I'm adding 100 grams of wholemeal flour. About 10 grams of salt, and finally then we're using our yeast. We're using some fresh yeast, so we're using 10 grams, but don't get too hung up over fresh versus dried. If you don't have access to fresh yeast, dried yeast will work perfectly fine. 5 grams is all you're looking for. The only thing I would look to do is to avoid it coming in direct contact with the salt, so you can put the yeast one side of the bowl, the salt the other. All our ingredients in, so we're good to go. One thing I love about the chef is the little flour guard, because we all have that issue. We accidentally turn the mixer on too quickly and you just get a big blast of flour everywhere. The kitchen's covered in it. The flour guard works absolutely great, keeps everything within the bowl. So we're going to start it off at a kind of a slow, gentle speed because we don't want to generate too much heat within our dough. So just kind of resist that temptation to turn the speed of the mixer up too quickly. So initially, as you mix the dough, mix it on about 2 or 3 on your mixer, and we're going to knead it for about 4 to 5 minutes. Our dough is starting to come together. It might appear that it's a little bit wet, a little bit sticky, but resist that temptation to add flour. The dough does not need it. Give it a little bit of time, it will all start to come together. We'll increase the speed gradually up to about 5, and we're going to knead for a total of about 8 to 10 minutes. We'll check the dough after about 8. You should find it starts to pull away cleanly from the bowl. Our dough has been mixing for about 8 minutes or so. So just to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to handling the dough, just put a little bit of oil on your hands. I'm just using a little bit of vegetable oil. So you can see that amazing colour. It's silky, it's smooth, it's beautiful and elastic. So all we want to do now is leave our dough to prove. So we're going to pop it into our bowl. Use a bowl of the mixer, no point in getting another one. Simply a little drop of oil, just rub that in. It'll simply stop the dough from sticking, which makes your life easier when it comes to getting your dough out. Pop your dough in, and we're going to leave it prove for about an hour. We will cover that over. You can use a little bit of cling film, you can use a tea towel, whatever you like. The reason we cover it over is just to stop a skin forming on the surface of the dough. So cover it over, leave for an hour, and we'll come back to it later on and we're going to knock it back and we're going to shape it. So our dough has been proven for the last hour. You can see it's well risen. It's got a nice little bounce to it. You can see by touching it, there's no fear of it collapsing. So the idea is we don't want to over-prove our dough. So all we need to do now is to knock our dough back. And knocking back is exactly what it sounds like. You literally knock the air from the dough. Simply just try form it back into a nice little ball, a bit like it was about an hour ago. And by doing so, you will naturally knock all the air from the dough. So you can see I'm not really using any flour on the work surface. If it is a little bit soft or a little bit sticky, simply a little bit of flour in your hands will work just as well. Instead, I had the need for dumping loads of flour onto the work surface. So I'm going to use 2 different size tins. Well, they both take the same weight of dough, but 2 different shapes. Now you can quite happily just do 1 large loaf if you wish, but for the tins that I have, 455 grams of dough is what I'm looking for. So you kind of find as we kind of work the dough a little bit, we've knocked that air from it, you'll find that the dough is a little bit tighter now. It's basically it's the gluten all contracting. So what we want to do is we're going to let our dough rest. So we're just going to gently pre-shape the dough, and then we're going to let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes before we give it its final shape and pop it straight in our tin. A little stretch, fold each one over the last. As I say, the dough is not too curved around. Simply flip it over, give it a little roll. We let it rest. So our dough has been resting for about 10 minutes now. So all we want to do is give it its final shape. So simply flip it straight over. We've already got it pre-shaped. So a little stretch either side. Tuck them in towards the center. From the back, fold it in, tuck it over, and we go again and kind of tuck it back in on itself. Give it a little roll up. And then simply straight into your tin, seam facing to the bottom. So our dough is feeling lovely and active, and it's quite warm in the kitchen here today, so I'd expect probably about 40-45 minutes you're going to find these guys ready to go. If your kitchen is a little bit colder and you find your dough is moving a little bit slower, don't be afraid to give it a little bit more time. So based on the kind of the temperature that I have here in my kitchen here today and how active my dough is feeling, I would say about 45 minutes we're going to be good to go and ready to bake. Our dough is good to go. You can see it's beautifully risen. As you can see, as I touch it, it's got a lovely little bounce to it and there's no fear of it collapsing. One of the most important things when it comes to baking your bread, particularly in terms of sourdoughs or yeasted doughs, is steam. The idea is being for the first 10 to 12 minutes of your bake, your dough is still rising. So we need steam within the oven, which helps to protect the dough. It actually stops the crust from forming. So it allows us to get maximum rise from our loaf. This is just some water to actually spray the surface of the dough. Now you wouldn't do this with all breads. For example, if you had something that had a nice little flowered pattern on it, because you'd end up washing the flour off. But with this one, it's perfect. So the idea is the heat will hit it and it'll drive that moisture away. So I've preheated my oven. It's set to 230 degrees. And a little additional way to add a little bit more steam, I've actually got a roasting tray preheated in the base of the oven. Put it in as you heat the oven up so it's lovely and hot, and I'm simply just going to use a boiling kettle to add some hot water. "35 minutes, our loaves are done. You can see they got a beautiful rise. They actually feel really, really light. You can hear that hollowness to them. So this is the moment we've been waiting for. So that colour is just amazing. Beautiful crust, super light, absolutely stunning.